Everyone, welcome back. I'm Devin Dickinson, and this is Faith and Entrepreneurship Podcast. And I'm here with Lauren, and we've got some exciting stuff to talk to you about today.
Hey, Devin, how are you doing?
Doing great, thank you.
Good. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to read you a Bible verse that I think about often, and I think it's a great thing we should be keeping in mind whether it comes to business, leadership, our life, and that's as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another.
To me, I think it's almost something I adopted at a very young age, and I'd call it almost one of my superpowers. Because I do think that we have the ability in our lives to grow through relationship. And I think my experience has shown me, especially the entrepreneurs and folks who tend to become quote unquote successful, end up isolating themselves a lot and end up where people are not sharpening them and become prideful. And we know what the Bible says about pride. It comes before a fall, and end up putting themselves in this isolated world where no one is sharpening them. And I've seen so many people fall, sadly, from it. And so I think this is a great topic for this podcast. I think a lot of people might think, well, how does that really tie in with entrepreneurship? And I would say that if you're not growing as a person, professionally, personally, in all areas, you're going to either at best limit yourself, but probably at worst eventually fall.
Yeah. Let's start with just the verse itself. And, for some listeners, they may not be familiar with it. And I'd love for you to just break down how you interpret that verse.
Yeah. So there's this concept of iron sharpening iron. And you think about a sword in, biblical times, right? And how you sharpen it by grating on it, right? Rather than, polishing it, right? Yeah. The sharpness comes from abrasion. And so there's this idea that iron will sharpen iron. And so there has to be, you can't polish a sword to make it sharper. There has to be this friction.
Yeah.
A healthy relationship should involve some form of friction. And so from that...
challenging each other.
Challenging each other, right? Growing each other. And that oftentimes doesn't come by, just patting each other on the back and, having a beer and watching the football game, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And we should do that. We need to enjoy our friends. But relationships should help grow us. And that's what the Bible is saying, is that healthy relationships will sharpen each other.
So think about in business, why is it so important who we surround ourselves with?
Yeah. I've known lots and lots of very, again, I like to put quotes around the word successful, because I think we're all successful. And, success in business does not necessarily equate to success in life. But let's just say I've known a lot of very quote unquote successful business people. And I have noticed that over the years, the more success that many people get, the more that they start to isolate themselves and allow, instead of more and more people to speak into their life, they allow less and less people to speak into their life. And so what happens, if you can paint a picture in your head of a pedestal versus a pyramid. So the people that I have seen become very, very successful, but have allowed less people to speak into their life, end up building a pedestal of so very few people that they, quote, respect, speak into their life. And so eventually it may be nobody, which means you're on this very lonely pedestal, very, 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 very high up. Very unstable, if you will, right?
Ready to tip at any time.
Absolutely. And I've seen so many of these people climb so high, allow so few people to speak into their life, and fall so far. And this is, you see this all the time. You see this in business. You see this in politics. You see this in ministry. The less people that speak into your life because they don't qualify in your mind the lonelier and more of a pedestal that you put yourself upon. I feel like I adopted this verse very early in my life, and one of my superpowers that I think is that I personally have really allowed myself to live a very open life, and I let everybody speak into my life. And I shouldn't say I let everybody speak into my life, but I feel like I have the power to learn and to have that positive friction from everyone. And they don't have to, quote, qualify. Now, there's certain people I wouldn't allow in like my inner circle and tell them my deepest, darkest secrets, you know, but I really feel like we can learn from everyone. And when you do that, it's instead of a pedestal, it's almost building this pyramid, right? Where like you have so many people that like you surround yourself with, you build this really broad, sturdy base of constant feedback, of constant friction that really has grown me personally. And so, you know, when I think about it, I was sharing before that, like, even in exit interviews, right? Like, I read my exit interviews, and when people have negative things to say about me, I read that. I want to know that because that's friction.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's always right, but there's always something to learn. You know, I'm a coach. People would say I can be abrasive. People could say I'm aggressive, right? But like, I actually allow my players to speak back into my life and into the team. And I learn from my players all the time. And I'm going to be honest, like, I don't love it when a 17-year-old disagrees with me, right? Yeah. Like, I don't like that. Like, you know how many games I've coached, you know how long I've been involved in soccer, but like, I'm like, I can't, if I do that, then I stop growing.
Yeah.
And just this last week, we've been in playoffs, and I've had several players pull me aside, disagree with me. And I'm going to tell you, probably more often than not, I go with their opinion. And that takes a degree of humility, but that's this friction. And so people often get this idea that iron sharpens iron. Well, that means that only someone equal to me am I going to allow to sharpen me, or and again, you can't see this, but I'm quoting in quotes, equal, right? But I allow lots of feedback to sharpen, and I feel like it's one of my superpowers. And so now you think about your employees providing feedback. You think about your spouse. I was sharing before this podcast started that a couple weeks ago, I was at dinner with one of my sons, and he stopped me. And he was kind of uncomfortable a little bit. And he said, "Dad, I need to talk to you about something. And you're not going to like it." You love it when one of your kids tells you that, right? But he's like, "Dad, I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to like it." And then I said, "Okay." And he said, "Are you willing to listen?" And I said, "I am." And so he went on to tell me about how he didn't think some of my actions were appropriate and some things that I needed to change in my life, in my relationship with my children. And I got to tell you, I didn't love hearing that. Like, I didn't love it, but I digested it, and I realized he was right. And a lot of people would say, well, he's not iron. He shouldn't be sharpening you. They're not equal, right? And I'm like, he's iron, right? Maybe a smaller sword than my sword, but like, he's sharpening me. And it's helped. He was right. It is helping my relationships. And so what happens, though, is people, when they get these degrees of success, they start looking around going, who is worthy to sharpen me? Yeah. Which begins to isolate. And then in your own eyes, you start to you see yourself idealistically perfect. You see yourself as perfect. And so you start to shut out all of these other people, and you allow less and less and less people to sharpen you.
You know, we've talked a lot about kind of recognizing the people who could sharpen us. What about recognizing when someone we've surrounded ourselves is not sharpening us or dulling us? What things would you look for there?
Yeah. Again, I think we have to realize first and foremost that nobody's perfect, especially us. And so, you know, I use the word like inner circle, right? Like, I think there's inner circle that you share intimate details with, and, you know, that you really allow personal exposure, right? And so I think it's very important to evaluate folks that you have in that area. However, I think what happens is we mistake that inner circle for, and we only allow that inner circle to provide feedback, when I'm telling you, everybody can provide feedback. It's just how secure you are in yourself. And so if you're in that inner circle and you look around and go, this person in the inner circle, I'm not sure should be in my inner circle. And this takes me back to a moment in my life when there was a friend of mine that I was very close to, and he was inner circle. And I realized that he was bringing me, I was going the wrong way when I was with him. And in my mind, I thought, well, I'm going to take him the right way. That's what in my mind I thought. And I realized that more often than not, I would go the wrong way than take him the right way. And that was one of those defining moments in my life when I said, okay, I have to kind of remove him from this inner circle, but I can still enjoy him. He can still be a great friend, but I'm not going to allow him those parts of my life. And so that's discernment, right? And that's where we have discernment, because everybody shouldn't have free access to your emotions, free access to, intimate details of your life. But everybody, you can learn from everybody. Like I said, you can learn from a 17-year-old kid. You can get feedback from everywhere. And I try to live my life in a humble enough to receive the feedback, yet discerning enough not to allow it to inappropriately affect my emotions or my confidence. And that's a balance you have to strike, right? Yeah. So you have to be strong enough and secure enough to go, okay, I'm going to have discernment, but also humble enough, discernment on what I receive, but humble enough to be able to receive it.
How do you intentionally build meaningful friendships?
For me,
and mentors, I guess, as well. So
on the friendship side, I try to see the best in everybody. And I think the older we get, the more pessimistic you get towards people, if you allow yourself. And I was in that for a long time. There was a point in my life where I've been hurt and blah, 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 whatever, right? Like all these excuses to shut people out. And I realized, first off, that was lazy. Second off, it was selfish. And thirdly, it was hurting me. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to open up my life. And you know what? I also know that people aren't perfect, right? They're not always going to be perfect friends. And they're not always going to act perfectly and they have their own set of issues just like I do. So I have tried to open up my friendships. I've tried to open that up very wide. I'd like to believe that I have lots and lots of friends. At least I consider that I have lots and lots of friends. I'm not sure they all consider me a friend, but I consider them. I think I've had lots and lots of friends, and that has enhanced my life so much, right? I have lots of relationships, lots of people I keep in touch with, lots of people that, I get feedback from and I interact with and I learn from. And so I personally, rather than the older I get, the less friends I have, the older I got, I've learned to have more and more friends and allow more people into my life, because I've just realized we're all imperfect. And so when I bring them in, they don't have to meet a certain criteria. They just have to want to be my friend. That's it. That's the qualification. Now, again, if you want to talk inner circle, that's different, right? Yeah. But if they want to have a relationship with me, great. You're my friend. That's it. And it's very freeing. I'm not judging them whether they're worthy or I'm worthy. I just have enjoyed it, and it has really enriched my life.
Second part was mentors. So in someone who's helping you grow, let's say, business or leadership.
Yeah. The mentorship, I will actively seek that out, right? I find people that impress me in things that they do. Wow, that's really cool, right? And again, it doesn't mean that they're perfect. It doesn't mean that they're always right, but they're people that challenge me. And so whether it's spiritually, whether it's in business, whether it's with my family, there's certain people that I like to go to for those type of things. I want feedback. And I point blank just tell them I want feedback, right? So I have a good friend of mine one time had, because I also coached my boys, right? When they were playing. They're both out of school now, but that's not easy, coaching your children, your sons. And I had like not been doing things correctly. I had been too hard on them and too harsh with them. And my friend pulled me aside and he's like, dude, and he just lined me out. Like, just basically, I saw you do this, 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 this. I love you. I love your sons. I see where this is going. Yeah. And he just gave me a hard word, right? And I was like, thank you. And because I accepted that and because I let him know I want that, that wasn't the last conversation we had about it. Like, he continued to pour into me, And so people that I respect, I literally open up my life to them and I show them that I'm vulnerable and I show them that I want feedback there. So whether it's in business, there's people that I tell all my dirty laundry to, and I want them to give me feedback. And I don't shut them out, because if you shut people out, they'll be like, okay, well, I'm not going to tell them anymore, right? Like, I listen to it, I receive it, and I change. With my marriage, with my children, with my coaching, with even my health, all of these different things, there's people that I go to and I'm like, tell me when I'm wrong, right? And I'm just like, please, I'm an open book and I'm not going to shut you out. I'm not going to put up walls. I'm going to tell you the truth, right? Like, if I'm eating like crap, I'm going to tell you, or whatever it is that I'm doing, like, I really want to put myself in a position where that person can actually speak in and mentor me in those areas, and I actively seek it out. So if you have someone in business that you respect and you go to them, you're going to think, well, great, a mentor is going to go to me. I'm going to go to them and they're going to tell me how great I am. And that's what people really want in a mentor. They're going to tell me like how brilliant I am, and they're just going to tune me up a little bit. Yeah. Well, I want to go to my mentors and I'm like, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me what I need to change. Tell me the booger that I have in my nose, right? Like, and that's what a good mentor or friend will do. But you have to be a good mentee. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, and it doesn't have to be one person for everything. I go to lots of different people for lots of different things. And that allows me to get feedback and introspective and reflective. And then what I typically do is I take that, and then during my devotional time that I have, I try to do it every day, not always perfect, but I try to do it every day. I reflect upon that. And it doesn't mean that all the feedback I get is correct, right? So the feedback I got about my, when I was coaching, I took that, and at first I was like, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not 100% sure I agree. I took it and took my quiet time with the Lord and my devotional time. And like, not only did I realize he was 100% right, I realized like that was just the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, and it was like, boom, like it got confirmation, right? And so I think really taking time to reflect upon these different things and be willing to change and grow. And when you do that, people want to continue pouring into your life, and your relationships grow and grow and grow. And we have this very distorted view, I think, of relationships where, like I said, so many of us have this perfect, idealized, I don't ever want to be hurt. I'm only going to have a perfect friend. Well, you're not a perfect friend. You're not perfect, all these different things. And if you can just let that go, you're going to allow so many more people to grow and speak into your lives. So
without naming names, can you think of some people in your life who've sharpened you?
There's like 3 or 4 people in business that I go to all the time. And some of them totally understand my business inside and out. And some of them just understand business, but don't understand my business. And it's wonderful just to get their perspectives, right? And when I go to them, I try to really go and give them the unpolished truth, right? Like, just here's the dirty laundry, here it is, and get feedback. And they have really grown me in so many different ways, spiritually. Oh my gosh, I've allowed probably 3 or 4 people over the years to really kind of challenge me and push some buttons. That's been amazing. And then obviously I've shared several examples of my family, lots of people in family. And then my wife has been an incredible mentor to me, right? Like, and you think like, wait, what do you mean your wife is a mentor? Well, my wife is so much further than me emotionally and, with our children and with understanding of people and all of these different things that she mentors me in areas, right? And so all of these people over the years have mentored me. And again, I would say it's about being a good mentee, right? Because, if you're like, if you don't allow your wife to mentor you, to tell you hard truths, and for her to see the change, that relationship isn't going to grow in that area. But you talked about if I had good mentors, and what's cool about this is so I kind of just went through various mentor places or people that have impacted me. But what's really great is I'm going to flip it around as well, Lauren, is that I also have been a mentor in all of those areas as well. And that has grown me. So as much as having people speak into my life, putting myself in a position and providing the time and the effort to do that for other people will also grow you. And the analogy I've used before is like, it's really hard if you're a personal trainer to go home at night and eat an extra large pizza and skip your workout, right? Like, and so people always say like, hey, I'm a personal trainer, so it's really hard. Like it holds me accountable. And so when I pour into other people's lives, whether it's the kids on my soccer team, whether it's the alumni, whether it's employees, whether it's my CEOs, whether it's my family, whether it's friends that have reached out to me, whether it's spiritual people that I'm mentoring, whatever it is. And I have lots of people that I mentor, either in the official capacity or unofficial capacity. And when I pour out, I grow. The more that I pour into others, the more that my cup is full and the more that I grow. And again, that analogy of a pyramid, you can grow forever. A pedestal will only get to a certain height and then physics just takes over. It's going to fall one way or the other. The minute you reach imperfection on a pedestal at a certain height, it falls. That's just physics. But with a pyramid, it has absolutely unlimited growth. And I'm going to say that again. I want people to get this. If you're living your life on a pedestal, it's just physics. The minute you have imperfection, you're going to topple. And I've seen this. I've seen this so many times with quote unquote successful people. They reach this place and then they just topple. And as I'm saying this, and you're probably listening, people are coming to mind. And you've seen this too. But now I want you to picture a pyramid. Unlimited potential. That top of the pyramid can go as high as you want. It's unlimited growth if the base of the pyramid grows. And that grows by allowing people to speak into your life and you speaking into other people's life. Unlimited potential and growth.
How do you, as a leader, whether in business or on the field, make sure that or ensure that your players and your employees are growing as well, like have this mentality? You
should be able to see it in the fruit of their life, right? If there's no fruit in your life, and meaning that there's no growth in those areas, then they're not growing, period. And this is for them and this is for you too, right? Like if there's not change, if there's not positive growth, it means something's broken, period. Because that's the law of physics, right? You plant something, you water it, you give it time, you should see growth, right? That's the way God set up the world. And in our lives should work that way, right? So if right now you're going, there's no growth in this area, well, something's broken. And so when I look at other folks that I'm working with, if that's not happening, something is fundamentally wrong. People don't want to say that. They want to act like, well, the time's not right or this, that, and that. But really, if there's not fruit, if there's not growth, something's broken because we're designed, God put in motion, the principles of, planting, sowing, watering, harvest time, that's the principle of growth, right? Yeah. So when you're mentoring someone and vice versa, if there's no growth, something's broke.
So to close up here, what can we do, we being listeners, what can we do this week to start to make sure that we are finding other iron to sharpen us?
The first thing I would say is get real with yourself. Are you living a life that's a pedestal? Are you living a life that's a pyramid? And once you kind of understand that, like if you're a pedestal, there's a lot that needs to change, right? Like you literally may need to go see a therapist. You may need to get in the Word. There's lots of things that you need to do so that you can open up your life so that other folks can speak into it. And I mean that seriously. Like I've known lots of people going to therapy does not mean you're broke. Mm-hmm. It means that you're mature enough and humble enough that you know that you need help growing in certain areas, right? So maybe you need to be in therapy if you're someone who's literally caught on this pedestal and you can't break that. But if you're a pyramid, my challenge to you is open it up even more, right? Like allow more and more folks to speak into your life. Have discernment, of course, but be willing to receive feedback because that's where growth comes from. And this is one of those times of absolute 100% self-reflection. And for me personally, that comes during my devotional time. And I would challenge you, if you've never done that, like take your devotional time. And maybe the first topic that you really want to explore between you and the Lord is, hey, have I isolated myself? Do I have relationships? And if not, what can I do to build and grow healthy relationships? And most of the time, it's not about, going and joining a bowling league or something like that, which maybe that's fine. Maybe that's what you need to do, right? Most of the time, it literally is just you internally opening up your life to others and speaking into others' lives and allowing people to speak into your lives. And that's just organic relational growth.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
I hope that it is helpful because you're going to find that human nature tends to isolate, especially as you become successful. And it's not a healthy way to live. And you can see time and time and time again, the Bible speaks about this, that leads to a fall. The pride leads to a fall. And so I really hope that you take the time to digest this and apply it to your life.